Okay, so you played JV seventh and eighth grade.
Yep, and
Um,
then in eighth grade, I got caught up to varsity.
okay, so that means were you on the roster when they played Greece Athena?
Yep, yep,
Oh,
I was.
sweet, sweet.
John
Okay,
Wallace, the man.
the man. Yep, it was cut on the back of his
Yeah.
head.
I was pissed off like when like and then Coach Monty made it a point too. He would play mind games with us to piss us off. Like, look at this guy, he's got them in the back of his head, and like so it was man. I was ready to go nuts as soon as I seen him, just because I'm like, yeah, this dude really thinks he's that guy. It's funny, like I got enraged before the game because we were all sitting in the stands watching the games before, and he's laying down like sleeping in the stands. So I'm going nuts. Like, look at this dude. He over here sleeping, and he's got to play us. Like everything he did sort of made me go a little bit nuts. But
Wow.
he backed everything up though.
Okay.
But we just had no answer for him. I think it ended up being I kept the game as much as I could in control as a fairly low scoring game, but we just could not stop him inside, and it ended up they beat us, and then it was a shame that could have very easily been the state final championship game. And obviously Wallace went on to have a great career at Syracuse, and after that, so.
Year and the Big East. I remember Dick Vitale and ESPN kept talking about the Big East is loaded. The Big East is loaded. The Big East is loaded. Well, that's because you had teams like Georgetown with Allen Iverson. You had UConn with Ray Allen. You had Villanova with Kerry Kittles. And you also, a team which probably might not have gotten as much fanfare, is you had Syracuse with John Wallace. And I'm going to talk about him in a little while. Purdue was upset by Georgia in the round of 32, 76-69. That set up a Sweet 16 matchup between Georgia and Syracuse, and that was a great game. Syracuse was led by John Wallace. John Wallace has significance for me because he's from our sister city, Rochester. Buffalo and Rochester are close together. And there was no Facebook back then. There was no internet back then. So unless you were actively reading the newspapers or actively reading the recruiting publications, you could live in the next city over from someone and not know who he was. And so John Wallace was a big deal. I had a live stream with some of the LaSalle basketball players and coaches from Western New York. They played this guy one year in the state regional, and this guy was a parade All-American. It was a big deal. He was a big deal. So he went on to Syracuse, which is just up the road, maybe 2 hours. John Wallace stayed all 4 years, and so it was his team his senior year, and it was a great game between his Syracuse Orangemen. Back then they were called the Orangemen. It was a great game between his Orangemen and Tubby Smith's Georgia Bulldogs. It came down to 2 shots, one by Jason Sapola to put the game into overtime, and then John Wallace hit this game clincher to win the game. And it literally ripped the hearts out of the chests of the Georgia Bulldogs. I remember sitting there watching that game thinking, wow. And also that year, John Wallace was able to show his versatility. And I think that's what got him drafted into the NBA. Up to that point, he was the underclassman on a team with a bunch of senior players like Adrian Autry and Conrad McRae and Lawrence Moten. But his senior year, it was his team, and he got to show everything he could do. So he was making plays that I'd never seen him make before. So Syracuse defeated Georgia. And then in the regional final, they upset the Kansas Jayhawks. Okay. And that was a senior laden Kansas Jayhawk team with Jock Vaughn and Jared Haas and Scott Pollard. And I think Ostertag was gone at that point. But also, once again, Paul Pierce, who, years later would help break LeBron James. They were all on that team, and Syracuse upset them to go to the Final Four. In that Final Four, I didn't think Syracuse had enough to beat that Mississippi State team, but that Syracuse team did beat that Mississippi State team. It doesn't have the score here because it's covered up by that NCAA logo, but they beat them 71. It looks like 60 something. Remember, Syracuse played that zone. Jim Boeheim, that was his thing, playing the zone defense. They rode that zone defense all the way to the Final Four and into the national title game. In that final game, again, Syracuse, they fought to the end. I thought Syracuse was going to get obliterated by Kentucky, but it actually turned out to be a very, very close game that went down to a last set of shots. And one of the biggest shots in that game was from Antoine Walker. Syracuse was playing its 2-3 zone. Kentucky, they reversed the ball a couple of times. Antoine Walker, who's 6'10", he caught the ball at the top of the key, actually at 45 degrees, and he nailed a 3-pointer, which I think was either the go-ahead 3-pointer or the 3-pointer that put that game out of reach. But up until that point, up until what might have turned that game was John Wallace fouling out. So John Wallace fouled out of that game, and he was hurting Kentucky from all over the floor, from 3-point range and from down low. He was hurting Kentucky. And just like when Greg Anthony fouled out of the UNLV game in 91, and just like when Derek Phelps got knocked out of the Boston College game, Syracuse was like a snake with his head cut off without John Wallace. So they were fighting for their lives and just to stay in the game after he fouled out. So that was that.